and the heavy road-mending sound of aluminium upon iron. The noise grew fat and huddled over the women as they set off, a noise none in the city had ever heard before, one made more potent by its strangeness and lack of rhythm. It was insistent, oppressive, sharper than mourning. A group of young men at the first corner shouted obscenities and raised stiff forearms, but the grand clatter reduced them to hopeless fish-mouths, and their insults reached no further than the jaundiced burn of their street lamp. The organisers had expected at most a few hundred women from the Metallurg complex, but the rampant noise which followed the glinting curves of Tramway 8 came from several thousand, from youth and hope and friendship, from Red Star, Gagarin and future victory, even from Lenin and Red Army. Those with candles held them in the socket of their thumb, with their fingers gripping the cooking pot or frying pan they had brought, and when the spoon or ladle held in the other hand came down upon the pan, the flame of the candle shivered and grease sprayed over their sleeves. They carried no banners and shouted no slogans. That was what men did. They offered instead a battery of metallic noise and a sunflower field of yellow faces lit by candles which jumped at every drum stroke. The women came out of Stanov Street and into the square of the people, where the damp cobbles mocked them like a vast tray of shiny buns. They reached the squat, bomb-proof mausoleum which held the embalmed corpse of the first leader, but the demonstration did not pause there, nor did its volume of sound increase. It crossed the square in front of the Archaeological Museum, boldly skirted the requisitioned Office of State Security, where the old man strained and smiled and inched his foot against the white line, then rounded the elegant neoclassical palace which until recently had been the headquarters of the Communist Party. Several windows on the ground floor were now filled in with hardboard, and at the angle of the building an act of enthusiastic, if minor, arson had left a spreading swipe of black from the 2nd to the 7th floor. But the women did not pause even here, except for some of them to spit, a practice which had begun cautiously a year or so ago, became a national necessity for a while so that the fire brigade would be called to hose down the cobbles at the end of each day, but which now had begun to decline in popularity. Even so, enough women chose to express their contempt for the socialist former Communist Party to make those at the back skid on the spumed stones. The steady domestic noise, the sound of national keening in empty stomachs, passed the Sheraton Hotel, where the rich foreigners stayed. Some of the guests stood expectantly at their windows, holding the candles they had been advised to bring, candles of a better quality than those in the street below. When they understood the cause of the protest, some drew back into their rooms, reflecting on the food they had idly left on their plates at breakfast, small cubes of local white cheese, a couple of olives, half an apple, a tea bag used only once. The memory of their unthinking profligacy set off a brief match flare of guilt. The women now had only a short way to go until they reached the Parliament building, where they expected to be stopped by militiamen. But the soldiers, daunted by the advancing noise, had already retreated behind the large iron gates, which they had locked, leaving outside only 2 of their number, 1 in each sentry box. The guards were young conscripts from the Eastern Province, with brutally fresh haircuts and limited political understanding. Each held a submachine gun horizontally across his chest and gazed sternly above the women's heads as if contemplating a distant ideal. But the women, in turn, ignored the soldiers. They had not come for an exchange of insults, for provocation and the lick of martyrdom. They halted a dozen yards before the sentry boxes, and those behind did not press dangerously forward. Such discipline contrasted with the thunderous cacophony they produced, a beating, throbbing, dinning, hungry sound, which reached its full density as the last protesters packed into the square. The noise eased through the railings in front of the Parliament building, stalked up the broad steps and battered down the gilded double doors. It respected no procedural laws or rules of debate as it clattered into the Chamber of Deputies, imposing itself upon a discussion of land reform and forcing a representative of the Peasants' Agricultural Party to abandon his speech and return to his desk. The deputies were brightly lit, thanks to their emergency power supply, and for the first time embarrassed by their visibility. They sat in silence, occasionally glancing at one another and shrugging as the enormous protest, which contained no words but every argument, invaded the place where they worked. Outside, the women beat their spoons and ladles on cooking pots and frying pans, wood on aluminium, wood on iron, aluminium on iron, aluminium upon itself. The candles had burnt down, and the wax